Hi, this is Jason Leahy, Executive Director of the Illinois Principals Association, and thank you for taking a few moments out of your day to join me for this IPA podcast. And it's always a pleasure to have with me on the phone to talk about key issues going on related to education here in the state of Illinois, and that's our State Superintendent, Dr. Tony Smith. So, Dr. Smith, thanks for your time. Sure appreciate it as always.
Hi, Jason. Thanks for having me.
So, a lot of things happening. I think one thing that we're going to just continue to hit the pause button on here in Springfield, since we're at the start of the 2-week spring break here on April 10th for the General Assembly. Maybe we'll just leave State House related issues off to the side, because those things have probably been twisted, turned, beaten every which way but loose as of right now with commentary. And I'd like to kind of deal with some things that are moving in what I believe to be a real positive direction, Tony, if that's okay with you.
It's more than fine. Sounds good.
You bet. Well, so the first one, we've after probably a record-setting number of meetings with stakeholder groups across the state over the last several months. The final ESSA plan has now been drafted and signed off on and shipped off to the Department of Education. How are you feeling about that right now, Tony?
Well, first of all, the kind of work that went into that and the relationships that got built around the state, the dialogue was fantastic. And what we've said is that now getting the plan done and in is really the start. The implementation and the work of building this new framework together is now launches. But yeah, the work over the last year, obviously the new plan was signed into law. The law was Every Student Succeeds Act was in December of 2015, and that really launched us in January of 16 into a conversation about how do we want to go about creating a plan for the state. And to your point, more than 100 public meetings, ended up being 4 drafts, and the back and forth with community members. We actually had student focus groups, educator groups, stakeholders across the state, the governor's office, General Assembly. We had hearings leading up to the board reviewing and at its March meeting, voting unanimously to support the plan that we had drafted and created. And then the governor signed it the day after the meeting, and got a bunch of formatting issues and all that back and forth stuff to get it submitted. And now begins the conversation with the U.S. Department. They have 120 days to give us feedback and to, kind of be in dialogue with us. But really, we've already started the work on some of the elements in terms of the advisory committees and working on some of the indicators. So I honestly couldn't be more excited, because the framework, I think, is really solid, and it basically says we're going to keep working together, and we're going to work on creating the best system for kids, and we're going to work on supporting adults. And how do we go about that? Let's keep working together. So
you bet.
It's in, but now, in some ways, now the real work, right?
Absolutely. So you bring up the Department of Ed, Tony, and and we've had the unique situation here with ESSA where it was signed, passed and signed into law under one administration, and now a new administration under a new party is now responsible for implementing the law. And we know, quite soon in the Trump administration, we had Congress basically repeal the ESSA rules that were written under the Obama administration. And I think we're still trying to get a feel for that and what that means. So, you got any sense on how the ESSA plan is going to be received out there, how it's already being received within the department, and what we might be able to expect from them?
Yeah, we, at the beginning, and knowing that there was going to be transition regardless in terms of party, there just was going to be transition.
Right.
We had the opportunity, few of us from the board were in DC a few times, and talking with other states and really working with the Council of Chief State School Officers, that there were a group of states that really took the advice of Senators Murray and Alexander, who kind of led the writing of the law, and their guidance was, has been, is, if you follow the letter of the law is not going to change.
Right.
Regs may. The law is what we believe, and that's what we're putting forward as a way to get the best out of each state. And we follow the letter of the law, and we really work through, and from whether it's engagement and really seeking feedback, that was written in, talking about how to really tighten the system from pre-K through post-secondary, talking about blending and braiding funding,
right.
Things that were considered in the law. A lot of it was feedback about all the ways in which No Child Left Behind was flawed. They really did take that into consideration, and I think wrote a much better framework. So, there are going to be a few things here and there that might be tweaks in terms of, one administration highlighted this, the next administration's highlighting that. So just making sure that we're calling something the same thing. Yeah, I don't anticipate any feedback that says you guys missed the mark, because we used the law to guide the work. And I know that just a couple weeks ago, I was in D.C. for the legislative conference for the Council of Chief State School Officers and spent time with Senator Alexander. And he highlighted states that really included feedback and that wrote their best plan. And he was super encouraging. I've had also spent some time with Secretary DeVos, and she too was encouraging about the things that she's heard. So I think we should be in really good shape.
That's great. Well, with regards to the plan specifically, Tony, when you read through it, and I know you have probably more times than most of us. So within the plan itself, there are a lot of moving parts and pieces, obviously. But when you reflect on it, what excites you the most? What do you feel like we're doing in there? I know there's probably not one thing that you can truly pull out and be disconnected from everything else, because obviously it all works in concert. But where do you feel like we're really going to be able to move the needle here with what we've got in our plan?
That's a really good question. I would start in one place though, and that's about capacity building. I think that in the last framework, we had accountability systems that were super punitive. The targets and the way of reaching those targets were hyper directed. And what I know from being in districts is that as much as some things might be common in terms of how you talk about an issue, what it looks like specifically in my district is a little bit different. And so the path to addressing it, I can learn from other folks. I need to be able to really localize that solution and yet draw from and get support from colleagues. So I think what we've built is a framework that says folks who are working in schools, in districts, are working really hard, have extraordinary positive intentions, and sometimes need some support to get over the hump or to address a specific issue. So this idea of Illinois Empower and creating a place where the state agency is more involved in connections, establishing relationships, making sure that if in fact there's a vendor, that there's cost protection for districts, that the accountability system for outcomes isn't just residing simply on the school, that it's a shared activity, that if there are some districts and schools that have found ways to solve complex problems, that they can and in fact should be positioned as supports, coaches, helpers to other schools and districts. I think this idea of leading from the middle, that and in particular, so I think about being a district superintendent, like the role of the principal in creating healthy districts. If you've got your principals being thoughtful, sharing practice across schools, this is really working here, what are you guys stuck on? Principals coaching each other, raising real problems of practice. Like if you have a really healthy principal core, in your district, things get better fast in my experience. So in my sense, if I kind of now take the state perspective, if superintendents and principals are activated and talking about this and sharing practice, and I just think we all get better a lot faster.
Yeah.
So the thing I'm most excited about is the way we addressed the plan, the way we focused was accountability for support, accountability for outcomes for kids, and really accountability to long-term outcomes for the state. So the idea that 60% of the population by 2025 will have a high-quality post-secondary credential degree so that Illinois is healthier economically and socially. Like, we all have a role in that as K-12, and so to kind of position us as really important to the future well-being and health of the state, and to say that we can take responsibility for helping each other, and that it's not about punishment, that it's about, increasing opportunity for success for all of us, and not competing across district to say, we're a little bit better than you. It's really about, hey, how do we all get better faster, because kids only have one shot in the system. So I'm pretty fired up about the collaborative dimension and an accountability system that's about really learning from each other, that's not about punishing, and that's fair, that starts from really recognizes where people are, and not everybody's facing the same challenge, so we can differentiate support. And I think we've built a system that takes us down that road. Obviously, we got some more work to do, but I think the energy, the spirit, the language says that's what we're about, and I haven't seen that before from any state really. So.
Well, I think the whole concept of, just looking at the title of Illinois Empower, you can draw that directly to something I've heard you write or heard you speak about, seen you write about quite extensively, and that is the whole concept of being a community of educators, being a community of learners. And, I don't think probably true empowerment happens systemically across the board without true community amongst all the players, doing what's best for kids ultimately, and doing that by doing what's best for each other.
That's really well said. I think the idea of really being connected and understanding that all of our districts, serve all of our kids, and the better the system we build is connected and linked, as in connected to one another, the better off we're all going to be. And I think, obviously, you have heard me talk about this, but I do believe that the healthier and stronger a public school is, a public school system, the healthier and stronger the community is. So if we can get this right, I think we go a long way to addressing some very significant needs and issues in the state. And that's what we heard. We just heard over and over again how important, having fair access to quality education and having public education systems that listened to their communities and serve their communities. And so if we can put that out there and for places that are doing it, highlight them, and places that are a little bit stuck, coach them up, I think we get better really fast, man.
You bet. Well, so talking about the capacity building side, obviously you referenced this, Tony, but just curious a little bit more deeply about your thoughts with regards to the accountability system itself. As I read it, obviously as an advocate for school leaders, there are going to be parts of this that we're really going to like. There are going to be some things that still might give us some concern. But I would say that the thing that is probably to like the most about the accountability system is, it's moving us away from a true punitive system where you've got one test moment, one moment in time, looking at proficiency, right? 100% to where now proficiency still in play, but it does allow for us to have many other measures to see how schools are doing to move the learning of their kids along. Is that a fair assessment?
Yeah, definitely. Again, it's like that first round of listening tours. We heard all the things that people never wanted to see again.
Right.
It wasn't like people weren't quite ready to start the productive, forward-looking stuff.
Just want to tell you what I don't want to do anymore, right? Yeah, I get it. Well, get it out early, No,
but I think it was really important because it set the stage for how we would build forward. And some of that was that the all or nothing, you're either good or bad.
Yeah.
That's kind of that binary. People were really tired of that. And the other thing, and again, you know these things, but that growth was absent. And so you could have, whether you're a teacher or a school leader, you've made incredible gains that the kids grew a couple of years in terms of their content knowledge and demonstrated ability to reflect that. And they may not yet be at grade level, but they made extraordinary gain. And there was no real way to talk about that. And I think across the board, and again, so, people often associate that with a low-income, high-need community and saying that, you need to be able to show growth because there's so many other pressures. But I will say, obviously there was a debate too in some of the more affluent communities about why would we need growth and kind of little pressure on that. But I will say also in some affluent communities is like, what an incredible opportunity, because now we can say, we get kids who come in at grade level and let's even push further. And I think we're going to talk a little bit about some of the competency-based stuff that there's a chance to explore and do some things different and have kids move. And so if they come in already at or above, man, just opens up opportunities for us. So
yeah.
I think the growth dimension and the fact that it's now fully 50% of the accountability plan is a really important learning and lesson that we heard and took, but across the state, rural, suburban, urban, growth matters. And
it's something we've been advocating. It's been something we've been advocating for a long time here.
Yeah. Well, so now in the approved plan, Illinois' plan, 50% of our accountability structures on growth, 25% on attainment. So you get 75% academic, and then 25%, social, emotional, community, climate. And so you do get that broader picture, the full range, multiple measures, and still really fundamentally connected to growth. So I think where we're at this moment is a pretty significant step forward. Now, a few of those indicators, whether it's for example, the preschool through 2, a P2 indicator, a lot of people, again, across the state said, we need something to say that kids are doing okay. It's just some third grade metric about reading, critical to know, but couldn't we have known before? And the P2 indicator, for example, we've got, we said in the plan, because we weren't ready to name one. Illinois is a leader in the country on early childhood stuff, but even we didn't have something ready. Nobody did, in fact, across the state. But we said in the plan that by December 31st of 17, we would have a P2 indicator. So, for example, when I was saying that already we're launching into the implementation and starting working groups, like that's something that we're already digging in on.
Right.
Another one is the arts indicator, and it's in the accountability system, super important, but there was still so much debate about, is it just a young person takes a course and that should count? A young person has an arts-based experience. Does that count if they go to the opera or they go to a play? What actually is the thing that we're going to be saying is counted, and then what is the right weight for that to have? So right now, the arts indicator is in there as it's important. We need to figure it out, and it will be weighted and measured by 2021. But that said, we could accelerate that if that gets resolved more quickly. So there's still room to define these things, but it essentially the framework holds that we are going to have a 4-tier designation, which is if you are among the top 10% of schools in terms of overall performance, and you have basically eliminated or narrowed performance gaps so that none of your kids in your school are performing in the range of the lowest percent of schools, that you're exemplary, then commendable, then underperforming, and then lowest performing. So 4 kind of descriptive, non-punitive, summative ratings for the overall designation.
Right.
But then in terms of the growth space, a chance to talk more honestly about, in like settings with similar demographics, are kids making gains, and, how fast are they growing, and a way to rate or grade that growth, specifically around outcomes for those kids, as different than the overall designation of the school being good or bad just based on performance.
Right.
So,
well, and I think
lots of ways.
And one of the things I appreciate about our conversations, Tony, is, you're willing to lean into the issues that might, be a little tense for folks, or there might be some difficult conversations to be had around. And obviously, as someone who watches this closely and as an advocate looks at various things, one of those you referenced was the growth portion of the accountability, and the concept of assigning a letter grade, not to the overall accountability score per se, but within the growth measure itself. And I know that there's still some more work to be done with that. But how do you anticipate something like that working within the greater accountability system? And maybe I'm not even asking that question right, Tony, but I know, when you think about the letter grade concept, that's something that we, quite frankly, push back against, at least from the greater accountability system, as far as the overall score, but know that it's worked within here. So how do you see that kind of working as within the interplay of all the various metrics?
Yeah, I think it's a really important question, and it is how those grades are determined, and the grade bands is still one of the areas that the technical advisory committee, so we're getting feedback on just how that grade will be assigned. That's still work for this year, and lots of conversations. So anybody who's concerned about it, has questions, not just like in terms of I don't like it, but how would it work? Like, there's going to be room for these conversations to keep going. And the key is that there is something to be said for understandably, or in an easily understood way, indicating that this school, like school, similar demographics, similar, community-based challenges or supports, or like the communities are similar, that the activities that are happening in the school, that the performance of students, their actual outcomes are increasing at a greater rate. There's one way to say, okay, we need to understand that and be able to talk about that and both recognize and honor it, but also learn from it. I talked about before, so this is an interesting thing, that it's not just, some people would say that's really going to be about those, quote, low-income schools, and you really want to show growth. Other people say, hey, in the affluent schools, we're automatically going to be punished because our kids are already at grade level and we're challenged by demonstrating growth. So that's why in this year, we've got to do the linear regression, get to the quote, same starting place, right? So everybody gets kind of benchmarked against a common starting place. And then it does matter if a certain school says, hey, we're going to invest energy in really moving kids and getting them going. We're going to have a professional learning community. We're going to be talking about sharing practice, culture, climate conditions that accelerate both inclusion, belongingness, and performance. We need to see that, and that these are public dollars for the public good. There's a covenant, there's an agreement that every single one of these tax dollars, like there's an assumption and expectation that our families have that when those kids come into our care, that we're doing everything possible to make sure that they're learning everything they can. And we need a way to talk about that. And I know some people have some negative associations with the ADF, but that's the way that it made sense, and that's some feedback we got that, you don't have it in your summative, but sure does matter to different families to be able to say, if my kid goes to this place, they're much more likely to make a year's growth or more in a year's time. So that's where we are at this point, and there's still more conversation to be had.
Yeah, well, we look forward to those for sure, and sure appreciate your openness to that, as evidenced by the extreme number of stakeholder meetings. And I'm still waiting for the tour T-shirt, Tony, by the way, from all of those.
I know, I like that. That's a great suggestion.
But listen, I know your time's really limited, and we could talk about ESSA probably for the rest of this day, but we had some exciting news come out of the state board here recently, and I know that you were at a launch event kicking off the pilot for the competency-based high school graduation requirement program, and just briefly curious about your thoughts with that and what we can look forward to with that.
Yeah, I'm fired up. I think the thing that really gets me is that across the state, this is a conversation that's been going on for a while, and you got some teachers, some really creative principals, a few district staff, like, hey, if we got a student who has an apprenticeship or a job, like, how does that count in the school? Hey, we got some kids who want to take kind of advanced coursework, but we don't have access to it. How do we support them to do that? Some kids that are finishing, this idea of variable credit. So, a kid did a great job on 3/4 of the year's work, but got stuck on one thing. Do we have to have them retake the whole course?
Right.
Like, people have been wrestling with these ideas. And so, we took all of the leadership and guidance from the General Assembly and House Bill 5729, the opportunity to really push this competency-based pilot out there. As I've been visiting and driving around, like, there are folks that have basically said, if ever something like this happens, please let us know. And so we put out there, there's what happens in our secondary schools. They have to be so much more relevant for the kids, right?
Yep.
And they have to be much more relevant for community. In some places where, industry is gone and other, there's a lot of need. I think we're seeing that K-12 is in so many ways the primary workforce development agency in preparing kids for, healthy economic futures, healthy, socially proactive and pro-social relationships. Like, getting them out and engaged in their communities is really important. So the competency-based pilot considers that and says that this now is our collective work. And these 10 high school districts, these 10 districts are kind of linking in together and going to be sharing practice. And some folks have already done a few things that are really pretty far down the track. And other people are just like, hey, we're kind of thinking about how to change some of our core content. And we've heard, some people were on a visit to this place, but everybody, the 10 districts did the application, they met standard. They are ready and prepared to dig in together. And in fact, we have, next week is our first, call to kind of go through all of the different opportunities and connections. I'm really excited about what this portends for us.
Yeah, well, this is something I've personally been very interested in, and I know something we're really interested in as an association, and obviously with our Vision 2020 partners, we've spoken to this as well. And just personally reflecting on this, Tony, I can't think of anything more American than letting kids progress through at their own pace based on how their social emotional behavior is doing, but also how they become competent with the work and what the standards require, right? I mean, the days of the Carnegie unit just seem to be looking to get more in the rearview mirror with this, I feel like.
I agree with you 100%. And I think, it's important to understand the way things were structured, kind of got things started, but, it's way past time to do something different. And the fact that time and so much of the student experience has been organized just by time rather than about learning and demonstrating what they know. this is, I think, one of the biggest, most important opportunities we've got as a state. And I would say to engage educators as learners and as people that are ready to step into this, and this idea of micro-credentialing, this isn't just about students. This is about teachers who are picking up new information, trying new stuff. We got to have that count for them too.
You bet. Well, and we're included in this, and we're exploring that as an association for school leaders, also. And also not only just to give us an opportunity to recognize people for the good work that they're doing and the things that they already know, right? And not requiring them necessarily to sit for a period of time for us to recognize them for that.
Exactly. I mean, more and more, I just keep saying to people, like, if you can already do something, and yet I tell you, you're going to have to sit in this room, and you're going to have to come here for 10 days for 2 hours a day, and just until I tell you that you've done enough time, you wouldn't do it. Yeah. You'd find another way.
Yeah.
So why not think about, as adults, it's time for us to start thinking about that in ways around professional licensure, around opportunities for our kids.
Yep.
So common floor, clear, common, agreed upon, demonstrated outcomes about what we need every kid to know and be able to do. And then no ceiling, man. There should be no reason kids can't explore or go way beyond that. To your point about time. It's definitely about time that we are doing this. And so this pilot is a huge moment for us. And, to the degree that, we're hearing things, I'll share it with you and we can publicize it and have as many of these opportunities as possible. And love to get folks connected on this work. Yeah,
no doubt. We want to get the stories out for sure. Well, Dr. Tony Smith, State Superintendent, as always, sure appreciate your time.
Jason, I appreciate you very much. I appreciate your leadership, and, let's get this work done.
You bet. Absolutely. Again, Jason Leahy, Executive Director at IPA, with our State Superintendent of Schools, Dr. Tony Smith. Thanks for joining us for this podcast. And as always, if there's anything the IPA can do for you, don't hesitate to give us a call, and always check us out on the web at www.ilprinciples.org. Take care.